Hello, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. I am your host, mzuepman, and you are listening to the ZupePod. Today, there are a few topics that I wanted to tackle. A couple of them are pretty important to me. But one of the first things that I should probably tell you is that it's going to be a semi-continuation of my thoughts about how Nintendo handled E3 this year. And if you watched my last ZupePod where I discussed my E3 Nintendo 2014 impressions, it was very positive. I think they did a pretty good job. I'm excited for the games that are coming out. I thought the only problem with their presentation, however, overall, was that they're probably not going to suck in a lot of new people to the Wii U. I hope I'm wrong, but they seem to think that they're rounding a turning point within the next year and a half for the Wii U, and I think that's fantastic. You know, Nintendo, they make great games, regardless of what you have to say about their business, how out of touch they might be at times. Their games are still a lot of fun. Anyway, before I get to that Nintendo subject, which I kind of wanted to keep out of that last video because I wanted that video to be strictly about the video games themselves and not so much some of the other stuff that they're going to be selling in the not too distant future. Before we get to that, though, the first podcast topic of the day is going to be in regards to digital pricing. This has kind of been done to death recently. A lot of people have been talking about the PS Now test pricing that's been up. It's been changing a little bit since some of the outcry has been put out there on the internet and Sony's forums and so on and so forth. But that's exactly why they're doing this. They have to test this pricing model. There are a lot of other people that pointed out that, for example, I think the most that you have to pay right now is $30, and that's to rent a game for 90 days. That's not a good price if we're talking about older PS3 games. If you're talking about something else, you know, maybe a new AAA, you know, title like something on the PS4, that might be a reasonable price. However, not so much for older titles. And I don't really want to get into that too much, though, because, as I said, it has been done to death by a lot of people on the internet. It's not new news. But one of the things that I see popping up constantly on message boards, on Reddit, and the like is digital pricing, just in general, versus retail pricing. And a lot of people don't really seem to understand why retail prices seem to drop so low, so fast, while digital pricing on places like PSN and Xbox Live stay way up here for a really long time, unless they're part of some kind of, you know, PS Plus sale or something. And it's really not that difficult of an answer. I don't really think it's just basically common sense as far as retail is concerned. I have experience in retail. I climbed up the ladder very fast wherever I worked in retail, and it's just all about moving product. That's really all it is. As you know, when video games are released on day one, the MSRP, that is the manufacturer's suggested retail price, is pretty much $59.99 as the standard. Unless, of course, there's a special edition package that has some, you know, DLC content or other kind of goodies contained within, or if maybe the publisher is vying to introduce some kind of other business model into a game, such as Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare, where, of course, you could buy coins in-game in order to obtain things faster within the game. Those are exceptions to the rule, though. Typically, $59.99. That's the MSRP, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff being lobbed at Sony and Microsoft on forums and Reddit, and I haven't really read GAF in a while, so I can't really say about that. But in those areas in particular, Reddit and you know, other forums and everything like that, a lot of people are saying, why doesn't Sony just lower digital pricing? Why doesn't Microsoft lower their digital pricing? It doesn't make sense. Why would I buy a digital copy of a game when I can, you know, run to the store and buy the game for like, you know, a third less? When I could go to the store and buy a game for $40, why am I going to spend $60 on PSN or Xbox Live? And that's a really good question, and that's a good point. However, that's really out of their hands at that point. Those prices that you see when they get reduced drastically after 60 days or 90 days in the store, that's not a Microsoft or a Sony decision. That is a decision of the retailer that's selling that product. They obtain these items, and yes, there's MSRP of $59.99 on these titles. If you go to PSN or Xbox Live on day one as well, 99% of the time, the price is the same. It's MSRP, $59.99. Over that 60 days and 90 days, yeah, you're going to see some price drops in store, so a lot of people tend to wait, and that's fair, I guess, you know, if you want to save some money. If you don't need to have the game right now, it's a good option for you. But the MSRP doesn't change when that happens. The MSRP on these titles is still $59.99 in store. Microsoft and Sony doesn't change anything. As a matter of fact, it's the publisher that sets these prices for digital and physical. So when you see these games reduced to like $40 after just a few months, it's because the store is selling these games at a loss. Why? I know it sounds like a cliche that shelf space is money, but it really, really is. If you have a product that's sitting on the shelf that's not moving units, it's dead shelf space, essentially. So the retailer wants to get rid of it because they could put something else in place of that product that will sell and will make them money. So what happens is, especially when you're talking about video games or movies in the form of DVDs or Blu-rays or whatever, the interest for these titles is usually right at the time of release. You know, how many people are running to the store on a daily basis 2 months from now to pick up a copy of Watch Dogs? Certainly not as many as within the first, you know, day, week, month. So what happens is units aren't moving so much anymore. So the store says, you know what, we have to do something about this. It's still a pretty new product though. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to reduce the price to maybe $50, maybe $45, and people are going to say, that is such a great deal, I have to get to the store and buy it. Now, why are they doing this if they're losing money on it? Again, the MSRP has not changed. It's still $59.99. They're doing this because this product has then become a loss leader. Yes, I just did the stupid quotes thing. Sorry. But it's a loss leader. And what that means is a loss leader is something they will advertise in their Sunday advertisement, in the Sunday paper. They're going to get you to go into the store by advertising that loss that they're willing to take on the product, so that there's hope that while you're in their store, you will buy other things while you are there, and therefore, hopefully, allow them to come out on top. This is largely what a lot of these ads do. So that's the story behind that. Now, of course, eventually over time, the price drops even more, and when you see that kind of stuff happens, it's just because generally interest is gone in the product, at least as far as, you know, taking up a whole bunch of shelf space. So they just want to get it off the shelves so they can sell additional product that will sell and make them money. Keep in mind, though, that this may only happen within the first 3-4 months of a game's launch. So you're like, yay, if I just wait a few months and I'm patient, I can get an amazing deal on these games, as long as I just wait like a quarter of a year. But again, because the MSRP has not officially changed by the publisher, that's why you're still seeing those digital prices on PSN and Xbox Live for the full MSRP of $59.99. Again, unless it's part of some sale on PS Plus or something. That's why there is such a disconnect between the physical pricing model and the digital pricing model. So you're saying to yourself, why can't they just talk to the publishers so the publishers can say, listen, when you release a game, we want to sell digital. We want to go all digital because I'm sure everybody's aware that Sony and Microsoft, they're eyeing the future right now. I'm sure they both want to be digital only by the time next gen rolls around, or for next gen. Rumor has it that Sony was going to do that with the PlayStation 4, but because they realized that people weren't ready for it yet, they did not integrate that into the PlayStation 4. Microsoft went ahead and tried to implement it with the Xbox One, and it did not go over well. You can guarantee, and this is, maybe I shouldn't use the word guarantee, but my opinion is that over the course of this next generation, I believe Electronic Arts has already kind of came out and said, listen, what we're seeing with so-and-so game is that 50% of sales of this title have been digital. That's great, but we're not content with that. We're asking ourselves, what can we do to make digital sales 100% of our sales? And then, of course, immediately after they say that, they kind of talk out of the other side of their mouth and say, we're going to shut down the servers, the multiplayer servers, for 50 of these games. It's a real... yeah, Electronic Arts never ceases to amaze me with how low they're willing to go and how much they contradict themselves and how often they pretty much prove our point through their basic PR stuff that they float out there via interviews or statements on their websites or whatever. But that's the thing. Right now, they know that not everyone is on board with a digital-only future. Personally, I'm not. I love physical over digital. That's just me. I am someone who appreciates the preservation of video game history. Sorry about the little disconnect in there. But digital only is not the way to ensure that. I believe physical games are. But I guess more on that in the future. My point is that they're going to be conditioning us to go digital over the course of this generation, and it's going to be in such small increments, and it's going to be in ways that's going to make people say, oh, finally, this is what's going to make me go digital. And they're going to be doing stuff little by little by little by little in order to make this happen. But right now, the publishers don't really have much of a choice. They don't, because what happens is right now is that you have video game industry entities that sell these video games. Places like you know who if you live in the United States. Even if you don't live in the United States, you know the name of this company. I'm not going to say it out loud here. I don't even need to. But basically what happens is their bread and butter, yes, are used video game sales. However, they still do work based off of pre-orders. Lots and lots and lots of pre-orders. You cannot call this place without having them say, hello and thank you for calling so-and-so, where you can now trade in all of your games and consoles and accessories to put down for a pre-order of blah, 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 blah. When you're in the store, it's the same thing. Oh, yes, well, next time, if you have anything that you want to bring in, blah, 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 and then you can pre-order, blah, blah, blah. They very much rely on pre-order numbers, and they also do sell brand new video games. Their profit margin is really weak, probably something like $6, $7 a pop, but they sell them. It gets people into the store. Again, loss leaders. So when they hear a publisher maybe say, here's what's going to happen. We're going to sell our brand new awesome title, and we're going to sell it for MSRP $59.99 for the physical copy in stores, but the digital copy is only going to be $45 or $49.99 or whatever. This is just theoretical, but basically what happens is this company tells the video game publisher, nah, you're not going to do that. Let me tell you why you're not going to do that. Because if you do that, you're not going to know really how many people are going to buy this game. You see, we know that you're basing how much money to pump into this game based on pre-orders. And as far as pre-orders are concerned, we're the We're the biggest puppy in town. That's right. We're Pitbull, motherfucker. We're Pitbull. And if you sell that game digitally for less than how much you're going to sell the physical copy in stores, we don't care. We don't make that much money off of it. We're just not going to sell it. We're just not going to sell your game. You can't have that now, can you? And the publishers go, no way. They wouldn't do it, would they? Oh, shit. I think they will do it. Can't call their bluff. All right, $59.99 price parity all around, digital, physical, whatever. And that's what happens. So the digital MSRP is $59.99. Now, while the official MSRP remains $59.99 in the retail sector, regardless of whatever these retailers are selling these games for, technically the price is still the same. MSRP physical, $59.99. Digital copy, $59.99. For them, they're not really connected with what retailers are doing. And I think there probably should be a system implemented that kind of addresses this so that, you know, they're not having such a disconnect. Because imagine if the digital pricing reflected more or less what the games would be going for in the retail sector. People would probably much more, you know, sooner flock over to digital than not. So I think they're missing out on a big opportunity. They're not really, it's going to take a lot longer for them to convince people to go digital as long as there is that price disconnect going on. They have to be a little more proactive than that. So I'm not going to complain, though, because I love physical copies of games. There's a ton of reasons for that. I'm not really going to get into it right now. Because the only place I'm really sharing this podcast with, the ZupePod, is on Dodge Scientifics. This is not going to be new news to anyone, but something that struck me as soon as I read it on Twitter some days ago was obviously Cliff Blazinski on Twitter basically saying, hey, I get together with a few of my video game developer friends, and he clarified it was more than just a few. And he was talking to NeoGaf, and guess what, NeoGaf? I'll give you a little tip. Most of them think you're a bunch of cunts. Those are not the exact words. I don't have them in front of me, but that's more or less what it was. He tried to explain after the fact that he's not really talking about his feelings. He's just relaying information as he's been told through other, video game developers and whatnot. And I don't know. This guy kind of seems to. I think the second part of what he was saying is complete bullshit, honestly. To be able to say, hey, guess what, NeoGaf? I talked to a lot of my friends, and a lot of them think you're cunts. I don't think he was just doing us a solid. And I'm not personally a NeoGaffer. I have an account there. I don't really post there. I just kind of go in and view stuff from time to time. But I think it's really... It's not a good situation. As Pete Dodd had specifically discussed in his podcast, the Doddcast, go check it out. It's awesome stuff. There is a pretty big problem right now in the video game industry is that the developers don't really get a lot of respect at all. People just seem to shit all over them all the time whenever they do anything wrong. Not enough praise for when they do everything right. And it's kind of flowing the other way, too. I mean, these developers are making games because they're passionate about video games. And but they're feeling the resistance from people, and they're tired of hearing people act like assholes all the time. And I get that. I understand that. I do. But you're just kind of furthering the divide if you go on the internet and say, hey, there's probably at least 100 developer friends that I know that I've talked to. And guess what? They think a bunch of you people out here on this internet forum, which is probably one of the most well-known video gaming forums out there for discussion on news and rumors and this, that, and the other thing. And guess what? We think most of you are a bunch of cunts. It's not right. It's not right. I'm not going to dwell on this subject just because Pete covered it so well. And again, I really, really implore you to go listen to that. He had a really good kind of story that he told about some experience he had in a different job he had when he was younger that kind of ties everything together really well. So go ahead and take a listen to that. But I just wanted to talk about it and mention it. I like the games that Cliff B has been making. I mean, back when I was playing on PC, really early day PC, I loved Jazz the Jackrabbit. I mean, back then on the PC, it was one of the only platformers that I had actually played. Other than that, I was playing Wolfenstein 3D and Doom 2 and Heretic and, you know, stuff like that. So, I don't know. I don't know. Kind of disappoints me. And he's not really gaining a lot of points with me either because I'm already sort of disappointed with him because I feel like in the past he's sort of been kind of laying everything on video gamers' doorsteps for what's happening with the industry. I kind of, without him actually saying it word for word, I feel like he's telling us, everything that's going on right now in the industry is your fault. You demand too much of us. You want great graphics. You want great gameplay. You want all these different multiplayer modes and this, that, and the other thing. You guys are asking for too much. Simmer down now, because you're asking for too much. Bad. And I'm not on board with that mindset at all. I mean, he's basically blaming us for microtransactions, for DLC, and really, to a certain extent, he's correct. Consumers are sort of a problem in this respect because they did kind of almost bring it upon themselves because these companies, these publishers have become so good at rolling things out in stages, little by little by little by little, and just kind of conditioning people to these things so that by the time they realize, hey, this is a problem, it's too late already. So yeah, you know, consumers really need to look further ahead than the product that they're buying at the now, and they need to understand what the consequences could be. Okay, if they're doing this in my game today, if they're charging microtransactions just to be able to kind of have this, that, or the other thing, what does that mean for the games coming out next year? Or the year after that, or the year after that? You have to speak with your wallet and not buy this shit. I'm not against all microtransactions. I'm not against all DLC. But for the most part, a lot of it's bullshit. A lot of it is bullshit. Don't give in. Don't cave, you know? Do you really need to have another skin for your character? Do you really need to have different articles of clothing on your guy or gal? Do you really need to have, you know, a different colored camouflage on that pistol? No, no, don't buy that shit. It's stupid. Just my opinion, though, of course. So yeah, he's been laying this at our doorstep, but at the same time, every game that gets released has so much shit in it. It has everything plus the kitchen sink. Excuse me. It has everything including the kitchen sink. I mean, take a look at games like God of War Ascension, where the entire trilogy before it was founded on single-player button mashing, just amazingly awesome action and fun. It was craziness. God of War 3, still for me, was one of the better experiences on the PlayStation 3. I love that game. I love that franchise. I know there's not a lot to it. I know it's not really deep or in-depth, and even the combat system's not really that deep, but it's fun. I enjoy it. But God of War Ascension comes along, and they're like, well, you know, it's going to be a prequel. I don't know, people might be kind of skeptical. We need to add something of perceived value here. I know! God of War multiplayer! And you know, when they were showing it off, when they were first announcing this aspect of the game, it looked cool, it looked fun, but the multiplayer was a piece of shit. It was a piece of shit. It sucked. It was terrible. Nobody asked for God of War multiplayer. Nobody needed God of War multiplayer. The only time that people were intrigued about it was when the developers came out and said, look, we're going to give you multiplayer. And everybody's like, ooh, I wonder if that could actually work. It doesn't work. So knock that shit off. How much money did they spend developing this multiplayer content, which ended up being complete garbage anyway? Same thing goes for Tomb Raider. Did we really need Tomb Raider to have a multiplayer mode? Really? Did they do it because they wanted to add perceived value to the game? Did they just merely do it because Uncharted was including it into those games? I know a lot of people like the Uncharted multiplayer, but I'm not particularly a fan of it either. I played it for a little while. It was fun. It didn't have a long-lasting impact on me, though. I didn't want to play it a year after the fact. Not something like the multiplayer that was in Halo 3, where their multiplayer was a huge part of the experience. I mean, it was like Unreal Tournament with like Halo characters. It was pretty awesome. So I'm not down with this whole blaming us for everything. How many games are they rolling out all this additional content that takes a long time and money and resources to develop for? Stop wasting money on shit that people really don't need. What you really need to do is do what Machine Games did with Wolfenstein. Now, before Wolfenstein was released, the new one that is, 2014, I was saying it is ridiculous that they're not including multiplayer. Return to Castle Wolfenstein, a pretty ancient game now by today's standards, I guess, as far as the video game timeline is concerned. When that multiplayer came out, for me, it kind of like redefined what single-player multiplayer could be. It was amazing. So for them not to include that in this game, I was like, I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe they're doing it. Not doing it, rather. And you know what? The single-player campaign that they included was a lot of fun. And you know what? They said in interviews beforehand, and I figured it was all just public relations mumbo-jumbo, but they said, listen, we wanted to focus onto a single aspect of this game so that we could give you the best experience imaginable. And I'm like, yeah, the game's going to come out. It's going to be like 2009's Wolfenstein game, which I thought stunk. And man, the game surprised the hell out of me. And it was it's some of the most fun that I've had video gaming this year thus far. More people need to learn from Machine Games and what they've done with that game. Focus on what makes the game tick. Don't bow to peer pressure to include this, that, or the other thing just because you think it's some expectation from us now. Because as long as your single-player component is strong enough, it's going to create great reviews. It's going to create excellent word of mouth, and people will buy the games. Getting so far away from the basic concept of gaming is that the game has to be fun. You can say what you want about Nintendo, but at least their games are still really, really fun on a regular basis. I mean, most of their first-party stuff is just immaculate. I know, my opinion, it's subjective, yada, yada, yada. So, I'm running almost about a half an hour here, so I think that's all I'm going to talk about today. I guess I'm not really going to get into the Nintendo stuff that I wanted to, but I'll give you a little hint for next time then, for the next ZupePod that I'll be bringing you. It's about this amiibo? I've heard other people call these things amiibos. I'm not really sure which is the appropriate way to say it. I think it's spelled amiibos, though. I'm not too thrilled about that. I think it'll probably make Nintendo a shitload of money, as long as there are a lot of homes with Wii U's where kids are playing them at home and everything, sure, but I'll leave that for next time. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to this edition of the ZupePod, and hopefully it cleared up a couple of things that I've had on my mind. Have a wonderful day.